Hey guys, Kevin Bupp here, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast. Our mission is to help you build and maintain massive amounts of cash flow through income producing real estate investments. And our guest for this week's show is raw land investment expert Travis King. Now, Travis specializes in the investment of raw tracts of vacant land and has transacted hundreds of deals since launching his business back in 2014. And together, he and his wife, Becca, have personally completed hundreds of land flips and along the way have helped educate hundreds of others on how to successfully build a profitable land flipping business. And so, guys, it's an honor to welcome Travis King to the show. Travis, how you doing today?
Oh, doing great. Hey, thanks, Kevin. Glad
Yeah.
glad to be here. And any opportunity I get to evangelize the asset class of land, I'm happy to do so.
Yeah, no, excited to have you here. And I've had a number of folks over the years we've been doing this show come on and talk about the land business, and everyone's got kind of their unique spin on it.
Yeah,
So excited to have you here and learn about what exactly it is you do, and how you set yourself apart from the others that are out there, entrenched in the same business model. And so, but with that, I gave you a very brief introduction. So if you would, Travis, maybe take a few moments and tell us a little bit more about yourself, your background, ultimately, I guess maybe what you did before finding your
right.
pathway into land flipping, and then ultimately why'd you land on land flipping after reviewing many other different types of business
Yeah.
models and opportunities.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So started out, the very ironic thing, full circle, is that growing up, my dad subdivided land. Okay. So like a lot of kids, you have no interest in doing what your parents did, right? So the funny thing is, right, fresh out of high school in 1999, I did my first subdivide and land deal, kind of joint ventured with my dad, but it was really something he facilitated, you know what I mean, and kind of spoon fed and helped me with, and I did really well on it. But I was attracted to, like single family, right? Single family houses, and kind of wanted to go that route, and that's really where I put my focus as I guess you'd say, starting, right, real estate investor was on single family houses wanting to buy rentals. Was getting some solid traction, doing pretty well in my early 20s. And then, 2008 came. And like most people, we don't have to go into that. Most people have you know, remember
A
that
war
era
story, sure.
fondly,
Yeah.
right? But yeah, so that hurt. That hurt. 2008 was very humbling
Hmm.
for me, and also kind of led me to spend a number of years kind of regrouping, and licking the wounds from some foreclosures, and from some really trying to, I'd say, getting into real estate investing without having a really in-depth, sound knowledge of
Okay.
it, and also
Okay.
being unaware to how markets shift, markets change.
Hmm.
Okay, just kind of assuming markets always ascend. So long story longer, was this time working as a W-2 employee in the corporate world. And on about I think 2013, I was always kind of looking for, I knew real estate was the avenue I wanted to take, but was in kind of search of a different asset class or something that didn't require as much capital.
Hmm.
Okay, when I was kind of, looking at buying a buy and hold rental every 2 years, using the W-2 pay stubs. The whole plan was to end up with 10 rentals, over 20 years. The very sad moment was when I sat down and realized that would mean I'd have to work and get pay stubs for 20 years, right? So I started to seek out other opportunities. And on a commute to work, I heard about land flipping as a business model. The way my dad approached it was very much more of a buy and hold, subdivide, sell
Hmm.
on payments strategy. Okay. And so I was unaware of land flipping as like a machine, much like house flippers or house
Sure.
wholesalers, right? I was unaware of land flipping as building it as a business model, kind of as a machine. And yeah, so that's on a commute like this, listening to podcasts, right, is how I became aware of land flipping as a business model, and just dove in, head first, 2 feet in, and really found early traction.
Okay. Yeah, no, I appreciate that background. And so just for clarity and just to have a better understanding of what your business looks like today, it started as land flipping. That's what opened your eyes up. not
Yeah.
necessarily buying tracts of land and improving them, whether it be subdividing or adding some utilities, what have you, and then selling them off individually. The idea is to find land at a discount and then ultimately wholesale it to an end buyer. Is that still the business model today, or has it evolved over
That's
time?
that's a piece, right? It's like a product in the business model. When we started early, it was like buying from online county auctions, right? So
Okay.
as we all know, not everybody pays their property taxes. Some people default, and then many counties they don't know how to run an auction, right? So they post them on sites like, and I'll give some of your listeners a tip here, bid4assets.com with the number
Okay.
four in the middle is a website that hosts a lot of county online auctions. You don't have to show up. Okay. This is when we got started. This is where we bought tax delinquent lots from. And we were buying lots for as cheap as $500 or $600 and selling them for 2,500 or 5,000 to start. Okay. So we started very, very small, right? And doing a high number of those. And then later we moved into, you know, outbound marketing, direct mail, and right,
Hmm.
and cold calling, some other things to essentially generate our own leads. But the business model now, the focus is like going direct to seller. So going to the off-market landowner, meaning their property's not listed,
Hmm.
and we're reaching out to off-market landowners with unlisted properties. And those channels could be direct mail, cold calling, texting. We're generating leads of off-market landowners, and then we're buying the properties. And some we're flipping, and then some that it makes sense. Subdividing is like one of my absolute favorite strategies. So we do a lot of subdivides. And what I tell people when they hear that, it sounds like you're a developer. It sounds a little daunting. But like I tell people, what we do is essentially split parcels, right? We don't put in roadways, sidewalks, infrastructure, power, utilities, okay? We find properties with road access on two sides, and then we carve them up one parent parcel into 4 or 5 children parcels. And just the simple act of splitting the parcels adds value and forces appreciation, usually about 100% or more. So that's one of my favorite strategies now that we do. But yeah, we'll kind of approach the acquisitions, case by case. If something comes in, it makes sense as a simple flip, we'll do it. If it's a large subdividable property,
Hmm.
we'll entertain subdividing it.
What do you think? What percentage of your business now revolves around subdividing versus just flipping the properties? Is it like
I'm
60
I'm
40,
being
70 30?
I'm being very intentional about moving towards. I would love for 80% of my business to be what I call minor land divisions.
Mm-hmm.
And Kevin, what that means is there's a lot of markets where if you subdivide an individual parcel into 5 or less children parcels, it's considered a minor land division, right? It's not a big subdivision. It's not a major subdivision. And what that means is a lot of time within 3 to 4 months, we can get through the surveys and the approvals. It's not like a 15 to 18 month process, right, of building like
Right.
a subdivision. So my sweet spot, and what I teach like coaching clients is minor land divisions where we subdivide into 5 or less parcels. And I would love if 2 years from now when I were talking to you, 80% of my business were that. Um, but we have a couple other unique strategies that kind of I stumbled upon along the way. One of them was encountering owners that own more than one property, right? So we would stumble across what we call duplicate owners or portfolio owners just by accident, when we're doing our marketing. And that's something that we decided to get intentional about. So now I pull very specific marketing lists of landowners that own, 2 to 5, let's say 2 to 10 parcels. So when I'm doing my marketing, instead of paying for my direct mailer, my cost of a stamp on one letter, right? I'm paying the same marketing expense, but the owners I'm targeting might own 2, 5, or 10 parcels, right? So there's incredible return on ad spend, right? And a lot of potential for outsized profits. when we do that.
In that particular strategy, what have you found? Have you found the motivation of the individual that owns, multiple parcels of land? Have you found their motivation to be different than that of just an individual that has a single parcel of land? Because my understanding of the business, most of the time, and you can please correct me if I mention any inaccuracies, because this is not my business. I just
Yeah,
understand it from a high level.
right.
Is that a lot of the motivation revolves around just carrying cost or property taxes, things of that nature, right? Just it becomes a burden, a financial burden, and property's not being used for maybe what they had originally intended, or maybe it got passed down, and again, it's an ongoing, reoccurring financial
Yeah,
burden. At some point, they're just like, okay, well, we're not using it. I hate spending $3,000 a year on taxes. Let's sell this thing, and have no idea what it's worth. But then when I think of, like, that's an individual, with one parcel. When I think of someone that's got five, six, seven, 10 parcels of land, I think of maybe a sophisticated might not be the right word, but someone that's got a slightly higher level of real estate sophistication if they've somehow stumbled their way into multiple tracts of land. Again, maybe they
right.
inherited it, but if they've accumulated or assembled those tracts of land over years, I would think that their motivation might be slightly different. But again, please correct me because I'm probably wrong.
Absolutely. Well, your assessment's pretty spot on. You're right in that level of sophistication, meaning like most people that have acquired a portfolio or multiple properties, it was intentional, right? And it was by design with the exception of
Mhm.
inheritance. So what we've seen a couple different avatars when we started intentionally targeting portfolio owners. One of those being like kind of the tax deed investor. Like when I told you I started, we were doing this intentionally to buy and flip the properties. There's a lot of tax deed investors that go to these tax deed auctions, buy a couple properties a year. They've been doing this for 1 or 2 decades, right? And they've just accumulated this portfolio of properties, right? That's one kind of avatar. Another is like the aging builder we encounter very often, where they still own like 2 lots, maybe 3 lots. They used to buy lots and build spec homes and sell them, right? And they've still got a couple lots sitting around that they haven't used. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
That's kind of like two of the avatars that we most frequently encounter is somebody that owns a higher number of rural vacant land parcels that are lower in value. They might be 40, $50,000 per parcel, and they might own 10 of them or 20, right? And then we might find the aging builder who owns two waterfront lots, right? And they're worth 150 or 250,000 a lot. So there are different avatars we've encountered, and there's kind of a third where we get into states like Texas where people own these large acreage, right, where they've carved them up, and they might own a number of like 40 or 80, or I mean, massive acreage, right, in Texas. They own a number of kind of like ranches or ranchettes.
Mhm.
Okay. Those are kind of the three avatars that we encounter when we started targeting like people intentionally. But you're right, like when you say it's either people are tired of paying property taxes or more frequently it's that it's underused, it's underutilized, right? That's
Mhm.
like the common denominator is we bought it 15 years ago, we were going to build a cabin, you know what I mean? But guess what? Now that we're like we never got around to it, now that we're older, we don't want to be up in the hills with a cabin. We want to be close to town near the hospitals, right? And near, you know what I mean, near the stores and right near
Yeah.
a Walmart. So it's almost always like a underutilization, underused situation. And occasionally like you can target propensity, meaning like people that are tax delinquent, probate. You could do the
Mhm.
same things with land you do with houses. That's not really our angle. But it usually is a timing situation, yeah, where we'll encounter somebody that's owned properties for decades and then they go, hey, you know what? I was just thinking about doing like a 1031 from these parcels of land into a house, right? And they go, great, you just caught me at the right time. I've been getting letters and phone calls for years, right? But now's the right time. So it's
Sure.
generally a timing thing, and it usually is a underuse of because this is vacant land, right? No structures on it, vacant, unimproved land that we focus on.
And how far? I mean, are these all rural tracts of land, or If so, I mean, what's like the radius that you search for, X
Yeah.
number of miles outside of a population of, Y.
Yeah, I joke that it's pizza and donuts, right? So it's donuts are kind of like you put the donut on the city, right? So, and anything within an hour of the metro area or the city is commutable, So think of anything commutable is kind of going to be more of an infill lot, a single parcel scenario where somebody's going to build whether it's a manufactured home or a stick built, they're going to live there and drive in. If maybe they can't afford to live right in an area, but they can live within an hour. So infill lots is like one product in our business, right? Urban infill lots, and then rural vacant land. And RVL, rural vacant land is our other product. And that's where we go from like the 1 hour of town, we go from like 1 to 3 hours. That's kind of that outer donut, right? That inner
Right.
circle, that 1 hour is the inner circle is the infill lots. That outer part of the donut, the 1 to 3 hours is usually rural vacant land. And that's really what we focus on. So when I say pizza and donuts, I mean the donuts are kind of our um, the areas we're targeting, and then the pizza is the carving, the subdividing. Generally, when somebody doesn't understand the concept of subdividing, I explain to them, hey, you can buy a pizza whole for $12, right? Or you can buy it by the slice for $3 a slice. You know what I mean? So
That's a
anytime
good analogy. I
all they
like
did was
that.
take a pizza cutter and carve it up, and now
Yeah.
they've forced 100% appreciation. They've added 100% of value just by using that pizza cutter and cutting up the pizza and selling it by the slice. And that's again, that's why I love subdividing, right? Because that's all
No,
we're
that's
doing. We're just
that's
slicing it
good.
up and we're adding 100% value.
Well, let's talk about that subdividing model. Maybe I always like to use case studies to get the point across, to give clarity to those that are trying to understand as listen to this, right? Try to understand what the
Yeah.
business model really looks like. So, is there a recent deal that you can speak to of size of the acreage, how far on the outskirts of a town or a city was it? Was it the inner circle of the donut? Was it the outer circle?
Yeah.
And then kind of what was the opportunity? Like it was one parcel ID, and basically we subdivided into five, and here's what the economics look like.
Excellent. Yeah, I've got a great one. Okay, so I one-on-one coach a client, Johnny, who lives up in Montreal, Canada. Okay. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. He's up in Canada. Okay. He was targeting the market near me within a couple hours. He's targeting Maricopa, which is where Phoenix is, Maricopa County, and Pinal County, right? An adjoining county, which would be kind of a commuter county. Like we talked about, a county that people more affordable housing, but people live there and drive into Phoenix. Okay, so Johnny was targeting Pinal County. He came across a 14 acre and change property, and we noticed there was, when I was reviewing it with him, we noticed there's road access on two boundaries. Okay, which anytime you have road access on two boundaries, it creates the potential to size when you subdivide. You can really size parcels differently, and you have more road frontage. So he brought it to me. We reviewed it together. We reached out to agents because we use agents in our business for opinion of values, right? To kind of triangulate and check for reason, make sure our opinions of value are in line. So we reached out to two agents. We got opinions of values. We decided it was worth $108,000. He was getting it under contract for 47. Okay. Not a bad flip alone, but it
Mhm.
was 14 acres. So one of the agents we worked with, we kind of talked about how we could size these properties if we subdivided it, because utilities were at the road, right? And there was houses all around. There were smaller parcels. So after checking with the county and giving them the parcel number, and they confirmed, yes, you can subdivide here, right? We decided to move forward with subdividing it. And we split it into a 5 acre, a 4 acre, okay, a 2.5 acre, and then two 1.25 acres. Okay. So when we did this, we created 5 children parcels. But what we didn't do, that some people that are new to subdividing, present party included, I made this mistake. I once subdivided a 40 acre into 4 tens. And then when I was ready to list them, I was competing against myself. It looked like a commodity. There was
Oh,
there
right.
was four of them, and they all were the same
That's a
size and the
good
same
point.
price. So I kind of learned from that lesson, and then also talking with the agent. That's why we carved up the children parcels in different sizes, is it gave everybody a different price point and a different size parcel to choose from. And it didn't create the perception that we had, an abundance of these same identical properties.
Hmm.
So that's why we kind of right-sized his properties. It also allowed us to get maximum amount. So through the subdivide, we forced 122,000 in added value or appreciation. Okay. It was worth 108. We were getting it for 47. Okay. We added 122. So we went from it being worth 108 to 230 by the simple act of subdividing. Okay. So we added 122,000 of value. It cost us 14 to use a land use consultant, which is kind of a done for you that and surveyors, right? Essentially, the land use consultant is the project management, right? The surveyors survey it. So you're just kind of babysitting everybody in project managing it. So we paid 14,000 to subdivide it. We added 122,000 in added value, and then he sold them off, one parcel at a time, right?
In that scenario, no, that's a great example. In that scenario, was he selling them off and carrying back financing, or are these
We
cash buyers that come in,
we
or just
prefer we listed with cash, right?
okay,
We list with cash, but we will entertain owner financing.
okay,
Because usually if you offer owner financing, you almost never have to budge on price.
hmm,
Okay. If properties sit, especially land, and you're really trying to dictate the market to cash, you can end up discounting 12 or 14%, right? To try to get your cash price, right? But if you offer terms or seller financing, you really don't have to budge on price. So it's a decision you make ahead of time before you list. You don't want a price cut for months and then decide you'll take seller financing. So you decide ahead of time. On this one, we made the decision because we were joint venturing. We were providing capital and funding the deal for him. We decided cash was cleaner,
hmm,
than tracking a seller finance. But generally, yeah, we're thrilled to do seller financing. That's a big part of the business, especially right now when rates are so high. It's an
right.
incredible time to be a lender, terrible time to be a borrower, right?
That's right. And got a number of other questions that kind of come to mind. So I think about any business model I ever look at is I want to know that there's scalability to it. And just using this one example, obviously he stole this property in a good way, right? Like
Right.
and I love getting phenomenal deals, right? Like that's what gets me excited on a daily basis, amongst other things. But like getting phenomenal deals on
Yeah.
property,
Me
it's
too.
always been
Yeah.
a big driver for me, right? Like that's just I love the hunt. And so with that being said, is it scalable to think that one maybe using this county and the surrounding counties that one could build a fairly substantial business and honestly one deal like that could change an individual's life, like it really is, like that's a lot of money. and
Right.
um and so I definitely don't want to make it sound as though like, well, if you just do one of those a year, that's not enough, right? Because it could be for many
Right.
people, right? Like that could be more than enough.
Yeah.
But is there a scalable model of buying them that low of a discount and actually doing the subdivised plan? Because what I hear is like, okay, it was worth 108 even at the retail value. Even if you just went out and paid retail for that property and 10 others that were similar layout, had similar opportunity to subdivide, and you just paid retail, and you could literally double the value or almost double it after your costs associated with the financing and the division, getting the land use consultant and all that. You're
Yeah.
still getting a huge return on your investment in a fairly short period of time. And so I guess, anyway, just I'm gonna stop rambling. I don't know if that was an actual
Yeah.
question or not,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
these
Well,
are the thoughts that come to my head as
I'll
far as
answer
building
the
a
half
scalable
question here. I
model.
answer what I think you're asking is so as far as scalability, the beauty of subdividing in particular, we're kind of focusing on one thing, but the subdividing is that kind of the whole Pareto principle, right? The 80/20 of like if we acquire one acquisition, we're creating four or five dispositions. So it becomes less about like having to go out and find 20 or 30 individual deals to flip per year,
Okay.
right? If we create 4 or 5 dispositions with one acquisition, um, our acquisition side of the business is not as hard. Okay.
That
What
makes
I'll
sense.
share if that makes sense, the caveat is the products we talked about, infill lots, like urban infill lots, and rural vacant land. There's more opportunity to find somebody that will sell you their $108,000 rural vacant land property for $47,000 than there is to somebody to sell you their waterfront lot in Tampa, Florida
Sure.
at, you know what I mean, at that percent. So infill lots, you generally buy deeper and pay more, right? And the reason is because generally properties in a metro area, these counties and cities, man, me and you, Kevin, we know they're going to get their property taxes, right? They're not going to assess it for 10 or 20% of what it's actually worth, right?
Hmm.
If it's a nice residential lot, in a near a big city, like they're going to have the assessed value at 70 or 80% of
Yeah.
actual market value because they want their property taxes. They're not going to leave all that on the table. Now, with rural vacant land, there's honestly, and this is why it is such an inefficient market, there's honestly no correlation to the assessed value and the market value. It's incredibly subjective. It's just
Hmm.
incredibly subjective. So I still remember a very small flip we did where the assessed value was 1,800, right? We listed it for 25,000 and sold it for 22. Completely, you know what I mean? No
Sure. Yeah.
correlation, right? At all.
Yeah.
So with rural vacant land, and sometimes it's zoned like agricultural, but they allow you to build a house. Like they'll allow you to build one home on this land. But since it's zoned agricultural, it's, the taxable value might be $10,000 and the property might be worth 100. So when we're dealing with, single families, SFRs, and even infill lots in urban areas, usually the assessed value is close. Not so high that we're going to
Yeah.
upset the taxpayer and they're going to come contest it, but close enough that we're not leaving much on the table for the county or the city from a property tax perspective. But
Sure.
with rural vacant land, there's no correlation. It is just huge inefficient market. So it becomes more about, um, what do you need out of the property, right? What do you need out of the property? What do you think it's worth? We're going to use agents for opinion of values, right? But it's not so much like vulture investing where we'll have a situation where you say, well, what do you need out of it? What do you think it's worth? And they go, oh my gosh, this thing's out in the desert. I inherited it. It's probably only worth 10 or $15,000. And I know it's worth 50 all day long. Okay. But again, it's only assessed for 8 or $10,000.
Hmm.
So there's a ton of opportunity in the fact that the assessed values can be very
Yeah.
low with rural vacant land, but the actual market value is much higher. So that's where it becomes a repeatable thing, not like a one-off, hey, here's the best deal. That's not even a best deal. That was just a very smaller numbers, a very repeatable deal, right? So that's why I like it is if you do the minor subdivide approach with rural vacant land, you could spend your whole career just doing that, not even going to infill or urban markets, right? So that's one of my favorites. But yeah, when you turn one acquisition into 4 or 5 dispositions, and in his case, I'll just add on the cherry on top for him was Johnny's up in Canada, and when we did this deal, about I don't know, about a year and a half ago, the exchange rate was like every dollar he brought back to Canada, it was like a buck 30 up there, right? So you know what I mean? So he does
Yeah.
this flip and then he brings the money back there and did really well with it.
That's a win-win. I like it. I'm assuming as far as utilities, I mean, you having electricity near or there at the location is incredibly important. But ultimately, as
Yeah.
far as um, water and sewer, if municipal water and sewer are around or there, great. But worst case scenario, then you're going to put in septic systems or I guess the end buyer, they would just want the ability to be able to put in a septic and a
Yeah.
well if they do choose to build. Correct.
Correct. So I kind of run through a due diligence check, of like flood zone, wetlands are
Hmm.
things that are very important, right? Road access, do we have with land? Do we have physical, not just legal? right? Or both, you know. Slope, is it buildable, right? So we kind of run through that whole check with utilities being a big part of it. You're absolutely right, because if there's utilities, then they can just tie in. They don't have to add a septic and a well, right? Potentially, which are costs. So yeah, anytime there are utilities nearby, the price per acre or price per square foot of the lot absolutely skyrockets.
Do you go as far as in your due diligence to ensure that the land actually it perks well for septic, and then ultimately you guys make a determination of where the water table's at, get a well consultant involved to determine how drillable the ground is and how far they have to go or how deep they have to go? I mean, do you take that into consideration?
We do. So the perk tests are kind of like regional, depending on the states you're in, right?
Hmm.
But yeah, what we look at it, Kevin, is like, what's the friction on the sell side? You know what I mean? What are our
Yeah.
buyers that are going to perform due diligence? They're going to ask for a survey. They're going to ask for a perk test. So we view doing some of these things as not just like due diligence on our
Sales
acquisition
material.
side, but we
Yeah.
actually feel like they really reduce days on market on the sell
Yeah.
side. So
Sure.
yeah, those are absolutely part of our process. And sometimes like a survey is different than the wetlands delineation report where they actually like, you know what I mean? Two different companies that go out there and perform these.
What percentage, just roughly speaking, of when you sell these lots off, I mean, how many folks like truly start, they actually start utilizing that piece of land for something in the immediate to near future versus those
I
that just buy it and all of a sudden you just see it's been vacant now for 5 years since we sold that lot to
right. I
Harry and Betty.
Yeah, I have no way to quantify now. So years ago when I started, we would buy these properties and then we would list them ourselves, right? Like on, FSBO, for sale by owner sites.
Mhm.
And so I'd actually interact with the buyer leads and they would tell me what they're going to do with it and I would interface. Now we exclusively use agents on the sales side.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So because of that buffer between, I don't track or see. What I'll tell you is in the last year and a half, we've seen a lot more like LLC and corporate owners buying up land, trying to kind of get into the asset class of land than we have like it used to
Hmm.
primarily just be individuals, right? And we've seen
Okay.
a lot more people kind of rebalancing the portfolio to try to include land. But yeah, I don't track that nowadays. When I used to actually sell them myself and list them and talk to people, I would have people like text me a picture 6 months or a year later of them, they put a cabin on it maybe in northern Arizona. And, I recall a guy here from Phoenix. They bought a couple hours north. Arizona, Phoenix just gets crazy hot in the summer. So a lot of people go up to like Flagstaff and go up
Hmm.
north where it's 5, 6, 7,000 feet elevation and try to get away in the mountains and either build a cabin or camp or whatever. But this guy texted me a picture of, yeah, they actually put a cabin. They did one of them cabin kits. And then him and his teenage son, he texted me a picture of them on the lot. But I would say he's an exception. Most
Okay.
people, it's more of like, hey, this is, like the previous owner, they have intentions, right? That's with rural vacant land. With the residential zone stuff, infill lots,
That's
it's
different. Yeah.
usually built on within
Right.
2 years, right?
Are most of your I'm assuming most of your end buyers, probably even just builders themselves, spec builders that are buying
Yeah.
it to build a spec home, or no, is it the actual end user a lot of times?
The rural vacant land's
No,
almost
no, the
always
infill
the
stuff,
end
the
user.
infill.
Yeah. The urban infill lots, yeah, a lot of builders, right?
Yeah.
We've
Hmm.
seen, with the interest rate, kind of obviously a huge correlation to the spike in interest rates, right? But a lot of builders, primarily. Right now, it's more individuals than builders because I think we all know builders have kind of pumped the brakes, if not slammed on the brakes, right? With
Sure.
building spec homes with interest rates. But yeah, usually it's a combination of the builder and an individual that maybe he's going to build a second home, right? We kind of try to operate in the Sun Belt states, so there's a lot of situations where people are building a second home.
Yeah. No, that's great. No, fantastic, and I appreciate all the insight, Travis. Anything else that we've kind of been all over the map here today, but anything else that you feel is relevant, as it relates to this business model that folks should know. The good, the bad, the ugly, anything in between?
Yeah, well, I think for us, I feel like any asset you're in, probably what you guys are doing, if you identify off-market leads, right? You
Mhm.
figure out your essentially your data source. Like you guys, I imagine there's vacant land that's zoned for mobile homes, right? That would allow for that. And most land wouldn't be zoned for that, right? But if you guys are trying to buy land and actually build and not buy an existing one, right? Understanding like your market and things like that, like a little thing like zoning codes and there's opportunity in that. So when you understand that there's a data source for any type of investing you're doing, it doesn't have to even be real estate. Once you understand there's a data source for that, and then you can generate leads with the marketing piece, by reaching out to these people that have unlisted assets.
Mhm.
You could, I mean, it's just incredible. You could almost buy any asset class you want once you understand how to get your marketing list and you understand outbound marketing. Things really open up for you. For us, that's what I think. Once I realized that I'm a marketer and acquisitionist, not so much a real estate investor. When you really learn that that's the part of the business that matters, that's when it kind of becomes a repeatable, sustainable thing. But yeah, I just love kind of sharing, the asset class of land because there's a lot of other ones where I feel like it's pretty competitive and requires a lot of capital
Mhm.
to get into. But for us, it's been a huge blessing because we've kind of scaled from me going from a W-2 job to a full-time investor to then teaching others how to do this to joint venturing, and that's what we do now is we have an education company where I teach people how to do this. We have a funding company where if people don't have their own capital or don't want to tie up their own capital, we kind of, lock arms shoulder to shoulder with them and joint venture on
Mhm.
these flips. So if we've trained them up right and taught them how to acquire land, then naturally they probably want to work with us or partner with us on these
Yeah.
these projects, right? And that's kind of like the business model for us. It's taken a decade, to kind of build these companies out and to do all that. But yeah, I think that's all I have to share. I would just share that I just published like about a month ago a book called The Land Investor's Playbook.
Mhm.
TheLandInvestorsPlaybook.com is the companion site. And that's something, Kevin, that it took me, 2.5 years to bring to market. We went kind of the conventional route with publishing it, and this was kind of pre-AI before you could write one of these books in a weekend. So we took the hard path, but I'm really
Yeah.
happy with that product. It's one of these things, if somebody's interested in land, um, it's a great orientation to the asset class of land.
Fantastic. We'll make sure we put that in the show notes as well. And then, your primary website, where's the best place to track you down, Travis, and learn a little bit more about what you guys have going on?
Yeah, TravisKing.com is
Okay.
a great spot. We have everything from a free 7-day challenge where you would learn about things like vacant land and infill lots, like we talked about, to courses, group coaching, one-on-one coaching, all sorts of products and services and training and stuff. If people, want to check that out or just check out the book, right?
All righty. Well, fantastic with Travis. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here. I appreciate it and wishing you all the best in your land business.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Alrighty, guys, that's all we have for this week's show. So until we meet again next week, this is your host, Kevin Bupp, wishing you huge success. Take care now.